In today's video we're going to be looking at this. Yes, this is the 14mm F2.5 Lumix lens, the version 1 of it. It's tiny, yes it really is, the size of the lens, and that's including the lens caps on it. Join me and let's have a look and see how we get on with it. Well, hi YouTube, this is Brian James at Micro Four Thirds guy, and today we're going to be looking at this. Not the camera, no, the tiny little thing which is on it. Can you see that? It's almost too small to see. You get the idea. Yes, the lens, it's a 14mm f2.5 Lumix lens. This is the version 1 of the lens, and as I say, it's tiny. The GX8 swamps this. I've tried it on my Olympus OMD M1, and again, absolutely swamps the lens, even though it's a smallish camera. So let's have a look and see how we get on with this lens. And we'll have a look first of all at the spec. Now don't forget, if you get the chance, don't forget to subscribe to this channel by hitting the subscribe button below. And if you want notifications of every time I upload a new video, hit the bell below, and don't forget to say notify for all, otherwise you won't get the notifications through. So let's have a little look at some of the spec on this one, shall we? Now I've switched from my Olympus 17mm onto the 14mm, so the actual lens that I've been doing in this test and taking some of the photographs with is the one that we're seeing at the minute, so you're going to see what it's like on video as well. I think this is a great little lens. One of the things I find with some camera equipment is you pick it up because you need to use it. It has a purpose, and it's one of those things you do for a job. Something like my G9, for instance. It's not the sort of camera that I just pick up for fun and take out. When I'm using the G9, I'm usually using it to do something. It's not one of those things which just happens to come into hand and gives pleasure. It's one of those things which is a real work tool. Very, very good work tool, and one I really appreciate having. But it's not one of those ones which is just fun. This lens, though, is one of those things that you just want to put in your pocket on the camera. You just want to put it on the front of the camera and use it, and it gives you such joy every time you take a photograph with it. Now this one, I'm really indebted to my friend Jerry for loaning me this lens. It's a bit of a bad thing in actual fact, because he's loaned me the lens, and it's probably worth watching to the end to see if I decide if I'm going to buy one for myself, because I haven't bought one of these. I'm using this, and I just thought, well, let's see how we get on with it. So wait till the end, let's have a look for that. Now, when it comes to the specs, as I've said in previous lens reviews, I don't go for spec sheets too much. I really don't like the idea of taking numbers off pages. They give a guide, but I've been in so many times where you've seen all these fantastic numbers but being disappointed in the real world when it comes to it. One of the things which may disappoint some people on this is the fact that it's got a maximum aperture at f2.5. But remember, this is a wide-angle lens. We're not usually going to be doing something where we're wanting super bokeh in the background. You may do, but generally we're not. This is a really good lens if you're going to do landscape photography, if you're going to be doing buildings, and street photography, absolutely fantastic, where you're not necessarily after that shallow depth of field. In fact, for street photography, normally you're wanting a depth of field which is much wider, so that you can guarantee you're getting your shot without having to sit around focusing and things. Talking to focus, it doesn't have depth of field markings or a distance marker now. So if you are doing street photography, you have to sort of prejudge if you do manual focus, prejudge your manual focus. But it does have a manual focus ring, and it's switchable to manual, which is great. So let's have a look at some of the specs. It's a 14mm focal length, which is a full frame equivalent to 28mm. So a nice wide angle lens, slightly on the wider side of normal. I've really got to love using my 17mm Olympus lens, because it's equivalent to what, about 34mm, which is that nice sort of size that I used to use a lot on full frame cameras and on film cameras. 28mm was always a little bit on the wider side, but what I've found is, as we've gone into the idea of doing vlogging and using video, I found that a wider lens is often very, very useful, because I'm very close. I mean, I can touch this lens with my arm here from the distance I'm at, but I've still got quite a wide viewpoint on this when you're seeing the video, and I found that these for video work really are useful. It doesn't have image stabilization. But if you're using most of the modern cameras from either Lumix or Olympus, you're going to find that the in-body stabilization is more than enough for this. And again, with a wide-angle lens, it's a lot less of a problem than compared to the long focal lengths. If you looked on my previous video for the 100 to 300, that had in-lens stabilization in it, and it really relies on that in the in-body stabilization to get a good shot. With a wide-angle lens, you've got a much more latitude as to what you can do. And as I say, without that sort of super shallow depth of field, the f2.5 really, in everything I've done, has not been anything of a problem. I'm usually well away from that. Maximum aperture on this is f22, so again, a really useful range. And if you are using this for landscape, at f22, taking a landscape shot, basically you've got from almost a couple of feet in front of you to off to infinity. You've really have got some fantastic depth of field on there. Diaphragm is 7 blades, and the rounded blades on this, so they give a really nice bokeh on the background if you do go for the sort of bokeh balls background. But personally, as I say, for me, it's a very, very rare thing that I would use it on a lens such as this. But if it isn't necessary for you, 7 blades on that. It is a rounded diaphragm, as I say, so it does you don't tend to get some of those sharp edges, those flattened edges on that. 6 elements in 5 groups, so although it's a very small lens, there's a lot of glass in there in a very tight sort of space. Minimum focus on this is wonderful. You're down to about 0.18 of a meter, which is about 7 inches. So really you can get very, very close to a subject and have it in focus, almost embarrassingly so. Because remember, you've got the depth between, it's not just the front of the lens. If you look on the top of the lens, you'll find, on the top of the camera, you'll find that where the focal plane is. Remember, it's focusing to that. So you've got a good inch and a half before you of camera on there. So you're physically, from the front of the camera, probably about 5.5 inches away from your subject and still being able to get in focus. Absolutely superb. Magnification is 0.1 times. It does have autofocus, and it is a really, really rapid autofocus. Now, as I say, this is the Series 1 lens, and you can tell the Series 1 because of the graphics around the side. It tends to have a grey body rather than black, and the graphics, the lettering on it tends to be a sort of yellowy colour rather than white on the later ones. I can't find any information on this which tells me that there is any optical difference, but I did find an article online which says that the focus motor was slightly different between the two. But to be honest, this is incredibly quick focus, very, very accurate. And again, with it being a wide angle lens, that accuracy is easier achieved than on a long lens. So unless the motor is maybe slightly quieter for video work, I don't really know on that. I'd have to find out. But as I say, I found one article which told me that it had a different motor on. I can't see any real difference on them. It is internal, fully internal focusing. So you don't get any lens hunt as it focuses. Which is absolutely superb. So there's nothing moves on the outside. The only thing is, I've got it on the thing here, but I didn't have it on before. Jerry, whose lens it is, tends to use a clear filter on there for protection. And I'm not a great fan of clear filters on lenses. I do tend to like to use maybe a lens hood if I want protection to give it an extra bit of depth. But the problem on this lens is the front element really is up against the filter ring. So you don't have much protection there. If you put it down, it's very easy to damage. So I think on this particular lens, a lens hood, which isn't supplied in this, oh, come on, Lumix, you do it for the rest of the lenses. A lens hood would be really good on this to give a bit of protection. If not, one of the clear rings. Why a lot of people don't like them is they do tend to make the argument, well, you've got two surfaces, a front and back surface of extra glass on there, and that can add to diffraction and reflection. You pay your money and takes your choice. I personally don't like them. Jerry does. I've and I can't really argue because I've seen some of the shots he takes on with his lenses, and they are superb. So I don't know best way on that. But me personally, I prefer to use a lens hood if I'm going to be doing that. As I say, it doesn't have a distance scale, doesn't have a depth of field scale. Here comes the killer part though. It weighs 55 grams. 55 grams! 0.12 of a pound. You don't even notice it's in your hand. If you compare it to the 17mm Olympus lens, which I think is wonderful, it's tiny, it's light, it's great. This feels like a feather in comparison to it. It really is. It's half the size and well less than half the weight of that lens. It's one of those sort of lenses, as I say, you don't even know it's there. And on the front of your camera, this lens is actually not coming past the edge of the hand grip on the GX9. It's level with the front of the hand grip. It's that shallow. It doesn't protrude past the hand grip. Unbelievable. 56mm in diameter, 21mm in length, 2.1 centimeters in length from back to front. 46mm filter thread, so it's a really usable filter thread, very, very common across Micro Four Thirds camera lenses, which means that if you are using a filter system on this, you've got no problem fitting filters onto it. As I say, it doesn't come with a lens hood though. So that basically fills up the specs. Let's have a look at a little bit of the history of the lens. Well, there's been two marks of this lens. The first one came out in 2010, which is the one that this is. The Mark II, as I say, the biggest difference that you can see is the graphics on it, and there is rumoured to be a motor difference between an AF motor difference between the two, but I can't see there being a huge difference in the operation of it. That came out in 2014. It's a great street lens. If you take it out in the street, it's one of those lenses which is just unobtrusive. And if you can stick it onto something like the GX8 or GX9 or GX7, something of that sort of ilk, rather than a DSLR shaped with the pentaprism shape on top, it's one of those things which just does not draw attention to you. You can be snapping away at people, and where with a more conventional camera and a bigger lens, people would start looking at you and asking questions as to why you're taking photographs of them. This thing, you blend into the background. It just doesn't cause any effect whatsoever. The build quality is superb. It really is. It's plastic construction, metal mount. It's got a metal lens mount on it, but the quality of the plastic is really, really good. It's got a metallized surface around the outside where the markings are, and it's just a solid piece of lens, but incredibly light. And if anything, it does make it feel rather inexpensive and rather cheap. It is just that lightness, because it's not what you expect it to be. There is no weather sealing on this, and if you are shooting in typhoons and things like that, you may find that there's a problem on that. But again, because it is so small to the camera body, to stop rain getting onto it, you can literally just put your hand over the top and the whole thing is sheltered. So unless you've got driving rain on the front, then you can really do an easy job of sheltering it under a coat or under a hand or something. And the thing is, if you've got driving rain coming in through the front, you're probably not going to be in a position to take photographs anyway. As I say, it's a superb vlogging camera. It's so small and so light, the camera's the bigger problem. And because it's 14mm, you can get really, really close into it. And because you've got that real shallow focusing, that 7 or so inch focusing, you can get so close if you want to. Of course, the problem with that is, because it's a wide angle lens, you do start getting distortion. And if we have a look at some of the prints in a few moments, some of the photographs have been taken. I took the camera out into Brampton, took some photographs. Then you can see how some of the distortion can affect. Why is this of interest for me though? Well, if you go on to the second-hand market, if you go on, some of the lenses in good to excellent condition for this model, the Mark I, you're talking about £100 to £115 used, and that's for an excellent quality lens. And that, you know, from MPB or from your local camera shop, that's the sort of price you're going to be paying for it. If you go for the Mark II, you're paying a little bit more, but even then, second hand, you're talking about £130. New, about £220. So these really are a bargain if you want to get into them. Let's have a look at some of the photographs I've taken. We'll go through some of these. I took this around my local town. You'll have seen some of the photographs already in the video on this. And for a town centre, for buildings and things, it really is good. But one of the things to remember, this is a wide-angle lens. It's a very wide-angle lens. We're not talking into the fisheye territory or anything like that, or the sort of super wides to the 7mm. This is a usable lens. So it's not giving too much distortion. But if you have a look at this, here's a rustic old garage door, which I took a photograph of. And you see I'm fairly straight onto it. But it didn't take a great deal of tilt, either taken from above or below, and you get that distortion come in. You really do get a distortion as you get the converging parallels, either up or down. And from that, I mean, basically I was taking, the straight on was being taken from our chest height. By the time I brought up my eye, just a foot or so, you've got that position where you're noticeably looking down on it. At waist level, you're noticeably looking up. So really, you've got to be very, very careful on that if you're going to be taking photographs of anything with vertical lines in it, which are going to give problems. And also, if you are taking something at an angle, you see some of these ones where I'm taking photographs of the building. Again, you got the trailing parallels off, the converging parallels from the horizontal. Now, this might just be the effect that you're after. This might be really good for you. But if it's not what you're aiming for, you need to put a little bit of care and consideration when you're taking photographs on that. I found the lens itself to be absolutely superb in its quality. A little bit of vignetting, a little bit of softness when you've got a fully open at f2.5. By the time you get this to f4, everything has disappeared. It is wonderful. It's not the sharpest lens on the market, I'll tell you that for sure. But I think sometimes we can get so embroiled in the sharpness of lenses, but you are so used to unbelievably sharp lenses now that we expect everything to be razor sharp. And sometimes that works really well, but quite often you don't need that. You know, we're not usually zooming into 100% or 200% on these. And again, for a wide angle lens, the amount of detail which is being crammed into a shot usually means that the super detail isn't necessarily needed on those. If you are going to be using this for anything with people on, you'll find that it's good, but you've got to be careful, especially if you're getting very close to people's faces, because you can get that distortion. But generally I find that the lens, when you stop it down to about f4, really has a bit of a sweet spot. f4 to f8, you can't go wrong on this. Again, like most lenses, you start opening up towards the f16, f22, and you start getting some problems coming in there again, softening off. But in reality, very, very usable lens. I think everything I shot, almost all of these shots, I just left it on f4 tonight. f4 was just so easy to use. It was mid-evening, so it was starting to, the main sun had gone down. It was a little bit on the dull side, but you see that some of the shots are superb out of this. The colour rendition, I think, is superb. The contrast that I got out of these was unbelievable. Now, all these shots were being taken on the GX8. So the GX8 with this lens on, very, very usable combination. There is the possibility of a slight colour cast when you get to, if you get to the idea of getting on the lens, you might get a little bit of edging and fringing and chromatic aberration. You might get a little bit of that, but it's so minute when I was looking at it today that I was struggling to find any. And when I did, put it into Lightroom, a little bit of change on that, and it was gone. Now remember, the camera, the Lumix cameras, do have lens profiles in for this, so they will get rid of an awful lot of that for you. And if you're shooting on the later Olympus cameras, you know, post EM1 Mark 1, then you find that they've got lens profiles in for the Lumix lenses as well, so they handle it very nicely. Using it on the EM1 Mark 1, you can still get that edging, just as we discovered in the 1.7 25mm Lumix lens. But again, if you go into the more modern cameras, it's taken into that. But even without that, taking it on your editing software, it'll get rid of those effects very, very simply. As I say, the overall colour rendition and the contrast on this lens was just absolutely wonderful. I just basically shot, all I've done is just a little bit of change in the exposure and the highlights and shadows on this when I processed these, so there's nothing really been added to it. So when you're getting some of the wonderful sort of warmth on it when the sun did come through, I'm putting that down to the camera and the lens, just being shot on a normal profile as well, but really getting some fantastic results. What about this lens? As I say, I've been loaned this. Is it something I would consider buying? Yes, unfortunately. Jerry, you're going to have your lens back very, very soon because I'm going to have one of my own. As I say, I've carried this around for a couple of days now, and it is just one of those fantastic things you just want to use. It just sits on your camera. You want to go out with it on the camera and you just want to take photographs. It's so, so easy. You don't need to worry about it. And it brings some of the joy of photography back for me. Quite often when you're shooting on the newest equipment or the most feature-packed equipment, as I say, if I'm taking the G9 out and I'm taking a really good lens out with it, it's great. I get some fantastic results, but it's very reminiscent of going out to work. I've been a professional photographer for quite some time, and professional gear you take out, it's your work tools. It's the same as having a really good set of sockets for a car mechanic. You need the really good stuff. You need to be able to rely on it day in, day out, and you need it to be ultra robust and ultra strong because it's got to be there every day, 24 hours a day if you need it. And that's what the G9 does, and that's what a professional range of lenses do, and that's what my EM1 Mark II does. It's that chunky reliability. But sometimes you just want something which is fun. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't reliable. I think this lens is very robust, really well made, but it's one of those things that you don't necessarily think you're taking a pro lens out. You just shoot with it, and you get pro results back when you see the results after shooting. And that's one of the things which gives me a bit of joy. So yes, unfortunately, I'm going to be spending my £130 or so on either a Mark 1 or a Mark 2. I'm not really worried which one. As long as it comes with, it's in excellent condition and comes with the packaging, I'll be a happy bunny. And unfortunately, it's one of those things which is going to get me out taking even more photographs. So in conclusion, as I say, this is definitely a lens I'm buying. I'm going to be onto the site tomorrow and ordering one. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget, give me a big thumbs up. That helps YouTube's algorithms to spread this video to even more people. And don't forget, if you do get the chance, there's a PayPal link below. Give us enough for a cup of coffee. I really would appreciate it. And don't forget, whichever lens you're taking, whichever camera you're taking, take it out, take photographs, and enjoy your photography. See you next time. Bye-bye.